What walls are standing in the way of what God has for you? Sometimes God's instructions may seem unconventional, but that doesn't mean they don't work. Hey, I'm Megann Marcellino, and I want to welcome you back to Generations at the Table. I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk to you about the subject of when God asks for faith, not a fight. And it's been a minute since we have recorded because Paul and I welcomed our daughter Willow in November. And so we took a little bit of a family break and a pause. And it was wonderful because we got to celebrate the holidays together. We got to be in Oklahoma. We got to be surrounded by our community and our family and friends that we love. So thank you to all of you who have sent us congratulations. And I know that Rabbi posted about his granddaughter. She was born on November the 4th. We are both doing so well. She has been such a gift to our life and our family. We named her Willow, which was inspired off of Isaiah 44:4, which says that the Lord will make our descendants like willows by the watercourses. And so she has just been such a gift to our family. And I have loved being on leave and just getting lots of baby snuggles and cuddles. But we're back and we're recording, and I was seeking the Lord, like, what would I say after a bit of a break? What would I say after a pause? And honestly, my head still feels a little bit like in that new mom fog, but I was driving the kids a couple days ago to their school program, and we were listening to the Storybook Bible, which I don't know if you've ever listened to that. I know it's available on Spotify, but it's so well done, and they love it, and they love to listen to the stories, and it's promoted all these really wonderful questions in their little hearts. But we were listening to the story about Jericho. And what struck out to me was that God did not ask them to war. He asked them to walk, and not just any walk, but the walk of faith. And I'm referring to the Israelites in their story of Jericho when God says to walk around and circle the city, one time for 6 days. And then on the seventh day, that they would circle again and shout. And I'm obviously paraphrasing and cutting that way back. But it just stuck to me that God asked them to walk, not to war. God asked them to walk, not to war. And it was like the logic of it and that tension of that moment, what that must have felt like. Like this is outside the bounds of what I think God would ask. And so just to kind of set up the timing of the story, because as you know, I have a passion for the Hebrew months and understanding those. And I've been really diving in the last few years. But I was like, when did this happen? When did the Battle of Jericho happen? And so in Joshua 5:10 and 12, it says that the Israelites celebrated the Passover at Gilgal, before the fall of Jericho. So we can assume that this was in the spring, probably March or April, most likely the Hebrew month of Nisan. And this is, the scripture would suggest that this celebration happened, likely before Jericho. So right before they conquered Jericho, they had gone through the Passover. And as we are preparing our hearts to enter this Passover season, I know that we're in January and that may seem like a little bit early for you. But as a ministry and as a team, we are preparing for you to come and put your feet under the Father's table. We are preparing for what the Lord has for us this season. And it's so rich because there's so much, I think, in this new season that he's bringing us. But I hope that you're preparing your heart. I hope that you don't just slide in this year, just in all the hustle and all the bustle and all the rush. But even in these months leading up, that you are preparing to pass over. And then from there, we are preparing to conquer whatever it is the Lord has for us, whether it is that Jericho season where he's asking you to walk in faith and not by sight, where he's not even asking you to war. He just wants you to circle around the promises that he's given time and time again. And then when he tells you to shout, then we shout. And so we have to understand that for the Israelites, Jericho was key in their conquest of the promised land, right? It was the entrance point. And it also was incredibly symbolic because it signified this major victory that the Lord had given them. So here we have Joshua in the lead, and it's like, no, our God is faithful and our God is with us. And he is the one that is going to enable us to take the land. So it was a strategic location and it was a fertile oasis. God didn't ask them to take something that wasn't valuable. This was a valuable asset. So I guess my question for you today is, what walls are standing in the way of what God has for you? What hindrances are standing there? What challenges are you facing? I think we can all look at those walls and those challenges in our life. I have walls and challenges in my life right now where it's just like I can sense the promise of God, but there's a barrier that is beyond my strength. I cannot strategize this. I cannot go to war against this. All I can do is take one step at a time and walk in faith in the promises that God has given me and trust that he is with me and that in his timing, not mine. I think that's the really hard part, right? I'm sure the Israelites would have preferred, could we just circle it for one day? Why 6? And then on the 7th, why? Why is that? But God was asking for them to walk in faith, not to war. And I think it's normal to sometimes feel powerless in the face of these challenges. And I think we feel the pressure to hustle and fix it ourselves, to do something, to strategize, to address the challenges. And I don't know about you, but I've definitely had those challenges where no matter what I do, it doesn't fix it. And I try in and of my own strength, in and of my own wisdom, to use what God has put in my hands to fix problems sometimes, and sometimes it just doesn't work. There's a mindset of like, good things come to those who hustle, right? Or hustle beats talent when talent doesn't hustle. Like those are like some sayings about hustle that I was reading and preparing for this. But sometimes God is like, no. And I'm not saying that God doesn't want you to work hard, because I'm a really firm believer in working hard. And, sometimes you just have to grind things out. I'm not saying that, but there are moments and times where you have like a Jericho moment where God is like asking you to walk in faith, one step at a time, circle the city day by day, and don't even say anything. So that they had to feel like this was like, they were powerless. Like, we're not showing our might. We're not showing how fierce we are. We're not showing anything about God. We're just walking in silence. And I think sometimes the most important thing that we can do in a battle is surrender to what the Lord has and surrender to his plan. So as we prepare our hearts to come into this Passover season, as we prepare our hearts to come into this spring in Nisan, which is still a few months away, we can begin positioning our hearts that no matter what, we're going to come through, we're going to pass over, and then we're going to surrender to your plan. And we are going to walk in obedience and walk in faith and not in our own wisdom and our own strength. Sometimes there's a struggle when God's plan doesn't make sense. Sometimes things do not go our way. And I think that is just a fact of life. We can pray and we can ask, but we don't always get what we want. That is just not the way, that's not the way life is. But I do believe that God is faithful to give us beauty out of ashes and to position us to succeed and to take our promised land. While we crave clarity and purpose, sometimes God's instructions may seem unconventional, but that doesn't mean they don't work. In fact, that often means that they do. Unconventional. They're out of the box. It's easy to question his plan. God, what are you thinking? And so what does that lead us to do? My encouragement to you is when you're in those moments and you're asking God, what do you want me to do? What does this mean? This is so unconventional. This is outside the box. It is, how can walking in circles accomplish anything? How can walking in circles win this war? My encouragement to you is to surrender and to maintain a heart posture of faith, believing God and taking him at his word, because trust grows in the attention of the unknown. Trust and faith are births in those moments, in those valleys when we cannot see, when we cannot hear. See, we wouldn't need trust and faith if we could totally see and know the outcome. We wouldn't need that moment, but God is birthing in us in 2025 this character of faith and trust that we will walk in circles even when it doesn't make sense. And I think what is so important about it is that we will not grumble. That God told the Israelites to be silent, to not utter a word until there was a sound of a shofar and a shout. Well, this not uttering a word was not only strategic in his plan for them, but that meant they could not grumble. They could not question. They couldn't say, God, what are you thinking? Joshua, what are you thinking? This is crazy. This doesn't make sense. No, they had to keep their mouth shut. And isn't that sometimes the hardest thing to do when you're in that battle and you're in that moment of questioning? It's like, I want to say something. And, my mom almost always calls it like, it's like you vomited all over the situation. Well, we don't want to give our words our power and life. And so God protected them from themselves, protected them from the doubt in their heart by saying, be silent. No more words. You can't say anything. As a mom with now 4 kids, I can't tell you how sometimes when we were driving, we were just on our long drive, Paul and Paul told the boys, he said, hey, let's play the quiet game. whoever is talks first loses. Well, we have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old little boy, and I mean, it was seconds. It was a fail of a game, and immediately someone talked. I don't remember which one, if it was Matthew or Joseph, but someone talked immediately, and Paul, it was just like, you lost. I think it was Maddie, our 2-year-old. He's like, you lost, Matthew. Well, telling Matthew he lost, immediately he burst into tears, and he's like wailing, and I was like, this is not the game for the moment. This is not helping us seek an atmosphere of silence. But sometimes we need to tell our soul, hey, we're going to play the quiet game. We're not going to say everything that we think. We're not going to say everything that pops into our head. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. And sometimes those paths are step by step, circling the promise that he's given in faith, mouths closed, heart postured in prayer, just waiting and seeking on the Lord. I wonder what God spoke to their hearts as they circled the city. I can only imagine that the first day they were like, well, that was kind of weird. And the second day they're like, okay, maybe I'm getting tired of this already. But can you imagine by day 5 and by day 6, like the anticipation, okay, God, what are you going to do? How are you going to show us your faithfulness? One of our biggest pain points is when we become impatient on waiting on God. They couldn't just get through day 2 and 3. They had to keep pressing on, even in the midst of not understanding. There was not an instant gratification. There was a waiting on the Lord. There was a circling the city. God asked them to walk, not to war. God asked for their faith, not for their fight. So the Israelites walk for 6 days without seeing any visible changes. And I'm imagining that they are excited, but they're also afraid. Like, what happens if all we do is we let out this massive shout that doesn't even sound like a roar to the enemy and nothing happens? Can you imagine? They had to be in that weird place of like, wonder what the Lord is going to do. But they haven't seen the breakthrough yet because it wasn't the 7th day. And the breakthrough came on the 7th day. So I want to encourage you, if you are waiting on the Lord for something and you are waiting on the promise and you have not seen the breakthrough, that it is not your 7th day. That you need to circle one more time with your mouth closed and your heart pure, following the instruction. Continue to follow the patterns that we see of the Israelites at Jericho. Faith requires patience. They go hand in hand. They support each other. They strengthen one another. And trusting God, we believe that the walls in our lives are going to fall in his timing and not in ours. And we are aligning our faith and our trust with our action and our obedience. Isaiah 40:31 says, but those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and they shall not faint. Who are those people? Those who wait on the Lord, those who trust in the Lord, those who match their faith with their action. So what walls are you facing today? What challenges are you facing? What is it that you're seeing that seems impossible, impenetrable, at the gateway to your promise, but it's standing there right in the middle, taunting you, saying, you're going to have to capture me first. You're going to have to take care of the situation first before you can walk in and possess the land, inherit the land, create the legacy. What is it? I think it's important that you're able to identify that hindrance and that challenge and then begin tackling it not only in prayer, but with God's obedient instruction. You know, when we start a new year and we're beginning new habits and patterns, one of the biggest things that I like to do is say, this is what I want in this area. This is why I want it. And this is a challenge or a hindrance that I have to overcome to obtain it. But it's so important that you can label the challenge and the hindrance as well as what you want and as well as the outcome that you're seeking. I heard someone say once, if you can't write down what you want, if you can't write the vision and make it plain on tablets, then you really can't go out and obtain it, because it's like you're going out on this treasure hunt without a map, you don't even know what you're looking for. It's just like this ethereal idea, this elusive concept. You need to be able to tell me what you want. Like the Lord is like, what do you want? And I think for me, sometimes that unrest comes in that middle in the confusion of I don't know what I really want, or I'm afraid to say what I want, or I know what I want, but I'm afraid of what I have to lay down to get there. Those things create this hindrance of us being able to obtain them. So if we have a Jericho situation in our life, we need to be able to clearly label, this is this Jericho, this is this challenge, and this is how I'm going to face it in the obedience of the Lord. But don't just treat it like it's not there, because it is there and it has to be circled, but it has to be circled in faith. So what is God asking you to surrender as you walk into that promised land? Maybe it's an idea, maybe it's a dream, maybe it's a relationship. Surrender is hard and messy and painful, but it is part of our journey. And what are ways that you can practice obedience in this season? One of my things this year has come as a surprise. I was on Instagram one day and I just saw a clip of Christine Kane, and she was speaking at, I think it was the Passion Conference, and she had brought a bed onto the platform. And she talked about the importance of picking up the word first thing in the morning versus picking up your phone. And she likened your phone to bringing in the Goliaths of the season, whether it's the news or your work or relationships or situations. Bring in the word first, bring in the sword first. And I don't know what it was about that moment, but it just struck me. And it was like, man, if there is one thing that I can do this year different to impact my mindset, it would be to institute that own rule for myself, that I will not get up and pick up my phone first, that I will get up and immediately before my feet touch the ground, read the word or listen to the word. And so, like I said, we have a new baby. We have a 2-month-old. What I have found for me that has been working is I use the Dwell app, and I just get, as soon as I start to wake up, as soon as she starts to stir, I do grab my phone, but I punch the Dwell app and I listen. And I just lay there with her as she begins to kind of wake up and kind of nurse. And we just let the word flow over us. So what was my hindrance? What was my challenge? My challenge was I've got a semi-newborn. And my other challenge was like getting up and reading, and I'm like kind of half asleep and it's early. But if I can just hit play and let the word wash over me, it begins to immediately transform my mindset. Immediately I am picking up the word. And so I just thought that was such a important step for me. That was my big challenge this year. One habit I can change, and it's small and it's little, but I do believe it can change everything. The other question I have for you today is, are you willing to trust him even when the path doesn't make sense? Friends, I can encourage you that in 2025, as you begin to follow the instruction of the Lord, that there are going to be moments when it doesn't make sense and you feel like God's instructions don't make sense. And there's a lot of question and there's a lot of fear. But when God gives you instruction and it aligns with his word, he is going to be faithful to it. He's going to be faithful to you, and you are going to see the prosperity and the abundance. But you have to be patient, and you have to walk in faith, and you have to walk when God says walk. He's asking for you to walk, not to war in seasons. He's asking for your faith, not for fight in seasons. I would be the first to say this does not apply to every single situation, but it does apply to some. And I think sometimes we miss those moments because we just want to do something. We want to act. We want to strategize. We want to hustle. We want to fix it. And God is saying, deep breath, one step with me at a time, even though it may feel like you're walking in circles. So identify those walls, seek God's instruction, and then take the first step. So many times I think we seek the Lord for his face and we seek the Lord for his instruction, but we miss the opportunity of taking the first step. Or we don't take the second step. We take the first step because it seems cool, but we don't take the second step. And then we just go through this moment of like waiting for what God's going to say next. One of the things that my dad has always encouraged me, that if you're in that season, you're like, well, I don't even know what to do next. You go back to the point of last command. What did God ask you to do? And if you didn't do it, you repent and you fix it. If you did do it, then there's not a lot left to do, but ask the Lord to reveal the step and to wait on him. But in the waiting, we follow God's instructions and we do not grumble. We just wait in faith that he is going to bring it. I think it's really interesting. I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but that this story of Jericho most likely happened, we're guessing here, around the month of Nisan. Again, we know in Joshua 3:15, it mentions that the Jordan River was at a flood place and a flood stage, and when the Israelites crossed it. So this would speak to spring events when the snow had melted and the river had raised. In Joshua 2:6, it mentions that Rahab had hid the spies in the stalks of flax that were drying on her roof, and flax is harvested in the spring. So that would again speak to a spring harvest season. So I just feel like, in a sense, that this is speaking prophetically to God's calendar again and what we might be expecting to go through in this spring, that we will go through a Passover. But then after we pass over, we're going to face that challenge. And how are we going to face it? With hearts of praise, with mouths and surrendered in obedience. And we're going to circle those promises that God has given us, and then we are going to obtain them. And again, I know it is only January, but it is never too early to begin positioning your heart for what God is going to do in the coming year. That's why we created the Goals to Grow workbook. That's why it's such a passion project for us, because we believe in positioning yourself to succeed in 2025. And so as we do that, we begin to ask the Lord, what are you saying to us in this upcoming Passover season? What is your heart towards us? And as soon as that, begins to come, we'll begin asking, what are you saying to us during Shavuot? We don't just seek him. We don't just rush into the moment. We prepare our hearts weeks and months ahead of time. And we ask the Lord and we seek his face, just like we rounded out the year and sought, what is your word for us? What is your instruction? What are you prophetically speaking? So I want to encourage you with this, that God's victories often come through faith and not through force. Yes, there's going to be obedience. Yes, there may be a fight, but it starts with your faith. It starts with your surrender. And you have to trust God just like the Israelites did at Jericho. And you have to do so with a heart that is not grumbling, but a mouth that is full of praise and a shout of the Lord when he says it's time. They said they sounded the shofars and they shouted. And that roar had to feel like such a release of trust, a release of faith, maybe even like the frustration and the pent up, we've been doing this, where are you? And then the walls crumbled. I want to pray for you today. Lord, I just lift up every heart that is listening, every heart that is waiting, every heart that has been circling the promises, every heart that is going to be circling promises in the months to come. And I just ask that you would give them peace, that you would give them an anointing to surrender, an anointing to wait on the Lord, as you asked us to walk and not to war, as you ask for our faith and not our fight. We put our faith in you, and we trust that you are going to bring those walls, those hindrances, those challenges, those things down that are between us and our promised land. That first step, that gateway city into us possessing what you have for us in 2025. We put our faith and our trust in you. Today, we've talked about the Lord and we've talked about his instruction, but I encourage you in closing. God's instruction to you is not just a rule. It is not just a guideline. It is to help you walk in a healthy relationship with him and a healthy relationship with others, because he seeks to be in relationship with you. He seeks to have your heart. He seeks it. He longs for it. He is pursuing you. And I hope that as we launch into 2025 together, that you are continuing to pursue him. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for being part of Generations at the Table. It was great to be back recording with you, and I am really looking forward to next week.